Hello everybody and welcome back to the DM's Book Club, your favorite place for random ramblings about D&D and other DM related menagerie of issues. I've lost track where I'm going with this one. This is an intro that has gone wayward. No, you're just gonna have to put up with it. It's gonna be great. My name is Ryan and I am here today with my favorite co-host, the only co-host. It's the Hello.
Hello. God, that's quite a statement. The only co-host ever.
You're the best I work with. Put it that way.
That's very sweet. Thank you.
Right to the top of the tree. How are you doing? You're right.
Yes, I'm doing okay. We had snow here. I know you had a bit of snow as well, and that was amazing.
You have to put it in context. Snow in London is so rare. I think I've been living here for 9-10 years now, and it's probably the third time I've seen snow, and the second time I saw it was a week ago. So this weather pattern has been nuts. Like I've never seen snow settle in central London before. I
don't know about you, Ryan. In fact, I'm one of those people that, like, for the first hour, it's like, oh my God, snow. And then any hours after that, I go, oh my God, snow. Like, because I obviously, I'm a person that goes places. If I had my shopping all planned, because obviously can't go out as much. And I was like, well, I can't go out in this. I'm like Bambi on ice when there's lots of snow and stuff. So I was like, every so often I'm just looking out and go, God damn it, snow. like, on that.
Oh, you see, I'm still of that sort of whimsical child aspect to it. I haven't quite reached that point. I love it when it gets a bit snowy and icy, because when you're out and you're walking about, nobody else is out. Like the world is yours. It's a bit like if you're willing to stick proper waterproofs on and go for a walk in the absolute torrential rain. It's brilliant because nobody else goes out. Like the world is yours at that point. So it's that sort of thing. You're watching everybody skate around, and around where we have, there are joggers that are out every hour of every day, and they did not stop once in all of the snow and ice. It's amazing. Like my wife and I are out on a walk and we can barely stand up in places. The black ice, when it really compacts down and gets really smooth like a mirror. And there are runners just scortling over it. And I'm thinking, how are you doing that?
They must know something we don't. Because, joggers are out all the time. And I think it's because it's that whole sort of thing, like we need our exercise, which again, that's totally fine. Like I do it as well. But it's to the point where like, is there a fun run I don't know about? Is there like who's won? Like,
yeah, or Secret Illuminati confirmed. One of the two.
Oh my goodness.
I think it's got to be what it is. But before we talk too much about the Secret Illuminati and summon the assassins onto our head, let's dive in to our episode for today. So, what are you planning to talk about today, Fee?
Well, it's like a great conspiracy, but it's on a similar note. I don't know about you, Ryan. I like puzzles.
Right. Before you even get started, okay, I would like to clarify this because I have been DMing for Fee for about 3 years now. And every time I have ever put a puzzle into any session, the amount of eye rolling I get from Fee is enough to actually separate her eyeballs through the back of her head onto the floor and down the stairs of whatever entrance there is into the room. When you said I want to do puzzles for the first time on this podcast, I went, I'm sorry, is that an autocorrect?
Yeah, puddles. No, let me put some context to this. I think in D&D...
I'm sorry. Sorry. No. I'm all ears.
Oh, good. It's out of puzzle in itself. Anyway, look, right, in D&D, there's like many staples. You got your dungeons, your dragons, your treasure, your mimics, your gelatinous cubes. Fine. One of the other big things we've always had is that you're in a dungeon and there is some sort of challenge or obstacle that's in the way. And instead of using combat skills or your persuading stuff, players have to use their sort of know-how and knowledge to get across it. And the most sort of easiest format to do that is through puzzles. Now, puzzles are different to riddles, right?
I'm glad we got that clarified.
That is a different distinction. But here's the thing: I also like riddles, but when I can get them,
also rubbish. But continue.
Also rubbish. So I thought we'd look at a way of putting in puzzles and stuff, a different kind of encounter, as it describes in Tasha's, that tests people in a dungeon, in an urban setting, in any sort of campaign. Because I think it's actually an interesting way to get teamwork together. You think about how many escape rooms now are like really big online. There are riddles podcasts that people are listening to. And I just find it really fascinating because you get those two people, like as you were saying, those people who really love it. And some people who are just like, wait, what? And then trying to figure out, and then when they get the answer, they're like, oh, bastards. And they feel, you either feel really stupid or you feel really great. So
yeah. I think it draws in a particular type of player that not necessarily is catered for in a lot of what D&D does as a main trope. I mean, right at the start, I'm thinking when I was reading the DM's guide at the beginning, so this is before any of the books came out, they talk about different styles of players, and you've got people who are really into the RP, people who just want a hack and slash, a roguelite experience where they get put in a dungeon, there's a skeleton, crit, there's a skeleton, crit, and that's what they're looking for, the min-maxers, the scientist sort of types, and puzzles, as you say, it fulfills a scratch on a particular type of player that really enjoys thinking and using skills and using a little bit of lateral thinking or spells in an unusual way. You all know the sort of player that looks at a spell list and goes, okay, that's interesting. How can I really mess with a DM with this spell? Puzzles are really good for that sort of sideways exploration of a character and what they can do. Some of the ones you've got picked to talk about today are very intriguing. So where do you want to start?
Yeah, so where we've got these puzzles from, Tasha's Cauldron Everything. I know that's like my favorite book just now for this book club, but I'm going to use it until something else comes out. So what's great about it is it's the first section I've seen in a DM book or a D&D book even that talks specifically about puzzles and like why to use them and how to use them. And there's actually a whole range of them. We've picked 3 of them because I know some people were like, oh, but I want to find it out for myself. That's totally fine. So we're going to only spoil 3 of them for you. I've also picked 3 that don't rely on visual handouts or clues, because when we're online and stuff like that, whereas you can normally quickly draw something and then hand it to your players or do a whiteboard to player, I thought, why don't you just have something that is just purely visual and it's just through your words that you're giving the puzzle? So I thought I'd choose 3 different ones. And there's 3 different levels in Tasha's. You've got easy, medium, and hard. And the idea behind that is that the harder the puzzle, the more likely players need hints, but not necessarily. It seems less intuitive, so they might have to work harder. So we're going to do 1 easy, 1 medium, and 1 hard. And we'll just do a brief explanation of all of them and how Tasha suggests how to put them into your campaigns and customize it for that.
Perfect. I have to say, Tasha does a fantastic job at giving the sort of aspects of how puzzles work in terms of these are all the things that I have, these are the features, you've got solutions, you've got the hints. And I think when we talk about all the puzzles, it's worth bearing in mind that they are designed to challenge a player's mind without necessarily tapping into the skills of D&D too much. This isn't supposed to be a group skill challenge or something that relies on a lot of dice rolling. And I think that's worth pointing out. There are hints that can be given for each puzzle, and they're all locked in with particular skills. And if you've got proficiency in those skills, you get the hints automatically if you ask for them. So there's very little mechanics at play here. I think this is really designed to genuinely test you in the player seat. So you're the one sat there. You've got to actually engage your brain for this one and think about what you're doing, which is a little bit scary.
And just to quickly add on to that, there is a line right at the beginning that says, don't worry whether it's the player or the character that's solving the puzzle, because ultimately, the lines are going to blur because the player will take over trying to think about it. And ultimately, it is about the group of players enjoying the challenge. As with all these things, it's all about all these players coming together and solving a challenge like an escape room, rather than, well, was it your character that said it? And if a player suddenly knows what the answer is or has heard about the answer before the puzzle starts, they're encouraged to sort of help with the hints, perhaps. And that's the one thing I do like about Tasha, is that all the hints, you have at least 3 of them that you could give out. So I don't know about you, Ryan. If I was doing puzzles, I would be like, if I say this hint, you're going to get it straight away. So it's nice to have little standards to go through. Easy puzzle. All right. Let's start with creature paintings. Very nice, easy, straight one. And what's cool about this one is that it works anywhere that makes sense for characters to be perusing several fine pieces of art. Now you think, oh, well, that's odd for a dungeon, but that's what's cool about all these puzzles, is that they're not necessarily just in a dungeon or in a crypt or anything like that, that you have to bypass certain old security or anything like that. It could be anywhere, like a fine manor, an art museum, maybe somewhere urban, or even even like a vault which just happens to have paintings in. And the idea is that your characters can see these 7 different paintings, which all feature a number of creatures of a particular kind. And there is a little plaque which says, in order to gain all knowledge, one must know where to start. Count on your enemies to reveal the source of the secret. This room is dedicated to defeat of all monsters within. From this, the idea is that you can see that these 7 paintings have different creatures in them. And if you count how many creatures are in each painting and then know what the name of the creatures are, it's trying to indicate that you are counting on your enemies, counting on them. So you can think, okay, you've got, You've got like 3 nulls. So 3 digits into null is O. There is 1 werewolf. So 1 into werewolf is W, and so on and so forth. And then you get the name out to go through all these 7 paintings of a creature. And that is essentially it. You just get like a phrase from all these 7 paintings. And usually when the players are doing it, they'll probably get it in a random order. So they have to rejig the words from an anagram or anything like that. And that is literally it. Just 1 page and just describing like, here are the paintings, here's the word that they get at the end. And then here's how you change it. And I just thought, so simple. It's a page, could go in anywhere.
And I like this one because it's got a couple of component steps that are all pretty simple when you look at them all separately, but adding them together may not necessarily be something your players jump to immediately. The idea that there are 7 paintings on the walls, okay, you're going to quickly get the idea that the paintings are going to be useful in some way. They all have different creatures in, okay, that's going to be probably relevant. They'll have different amounts of creatures in, and the hint specifically says to count on your enemies to reveal the source of the secret. Okay, counting them is probably going to be important as well. But then taking that information and saying, well, now we've counted all the creatures, what are we then going to do that information? The jumping to the taking the letter out of the names of the creatures that are in the paintings, that's quite a difficult step. So it's interesting. It gives people a little bit of a chance to sort of write stuff down, have a think, talk amongst themselves, encourage teamwork, really getting people to try and chat amongst themselves and think laterally. I mean, how would you approach this if your players were really giving you the blank stares? They've been pulling their hair out. They're not entirely sure where to go with this. What can you do?
So in the hints section, it talks about 2 things they can do. They can either do perception or investigation. It says there's a DC 10 on this. So it's a fairly just straight roll on that front. Or if, again, like you said, if they've got proficiency, then they'll probably get it. If you deduce that the number of creatures in each painting is important and use that number to determine it's an interesting one, that first one, isn't it? Because it says use the number to determine which letter of the creature's name they should review. I think that's a bit more of a giveaway one than the perception one, where it says when you're looking at the dedication, the words count on stand out more than the rest of the plaque. So I don't know, actually, in this respect. I feel like if you're giving like a hints in a certain order, maybe you do the perception rather than investigation, even though I think players would probably be looking at the paintings more, maybe looking behind, seeing if there was a hidden switch or anything like that. I agree with you. With this one, I think with this, it is more using like the comprehension skills and just having a little think about using it. Like I said, those lateral skills, but going, okay, so what could this mean? Yeah, with the significance of the final phrase, I quite liked how it said like it could either refer to another item on a scavenger hunt or something of a bigger mystery that's going on. I actually used it, or tried to use it, in our Brawl Room campaign, right in the middle, where there was 7 paintings and a plaque, and the player just went, "That's interesting," and turned around and left, which was great. But there was, for me, because I just took it straight out of the book, there was an owlbear statue or an owlbear stuffed animal or whatever in the front hall. So I sort of already laid the seed that there was something already there. And if they'd made the connection of what the owlbear was, they'd be like, oh, and if they go investigate owlbear, then they would find something else.
It's all about context, isn't it? All of these puzzles can be massively changed in both difficulty and obviousness by where you put them in a campaign. If you're going for a dungeon crawl and it is a linear path, you go from room A to room B to room C to room D, and this is one of the rooms you've got to clear in order to progress to the next area, you're going to look at it and think, okay, this is a puzzle, we need to solve it to progress. But if you've got a situation where, like in the campaign you ran, where the puzzle was almost adjacent to the story, maybe because it was side loot, there was extra treasure to find or something off the beaten path, or maybe it was one of 3 different things the players could do to actually progress with the story. So, they could have solved this, or they could have interrogated somebody, or they could have fought something, the different options to get to the same point. Then it may be less obvious that this is a puzzle to solve. So you've got a lot of maneuverability in how you want to present this and how difficult you want it to be solved and or actually even found in the first place. I think that's what the joy of it is, really.
That is an incredibly fair point as well. Like if you've got other distractions happening at the same time and you're not just in a locked room or a locked corridor, like you said, the linear path of the adventure, then it's more likely that they're going to miss it by accident. And that, I think that's completely fair. I think the other thing to think as well is that it says right at the beginning, it talks about sometimes it's okay for puzzles to be solved instantly, but also it's okay if they're not solved for many sessions, and giving that players time to think about it and ponder about it. Again, I guess it depends on if your puzzles are more riddle based, of the temptation to go and look it up somewhere, or if it's just like, I'll just type in the whole puzzle as I know it and see if there's another version out there that I can look at. I guess that would be the only temptation, I guess, as a player, but you'd hope players aren't like that. Just to quickly finish off on the creature painting one, in terms of customization, Tasha suggests like you can replace the monsters with pretty much anything that is distinctive. So, groups of objects or professions, which I thought was quite cool. So if you can imagine like a family portraits, that sort of thing, but everyone's like artificers or clerics or stuff like that. I thought that'd be quite cool if you had that in a big sort of a guild perhaps, and there was like a secret room. I thought that was quite cool to have. Basically, it's just saying like this is just one way of just grouping things together, but they have to be distinctive in some way. It can't just be just random landscapes, because otherwise why would that stand out to the players?
Yeah, something you can count. Even you could have family portraits of various generations of a family with different numbers of family stood in the portrait as well. So there's this person with their spouse and 3 kids, and this person's all alone, and this person has 17 people in the painting, and whatever it might be, you could have some fun with that. But as long as you're willing to spend a little bit of time to find a word that you want to actually then make an algorithm, a little puzzle from, because you've got to dissect that word and then find other solutions to make it work. I think the customizing I would look at is the context as well, is as much as anything. You could easily have this as a side puzzle that you present to the players very obviously, but they don't have to solve to progress. So you tempt them with a bunch of treasure on one side and say, hey, if you solve this puzzle, then you know that there's extra stuff here, but I'm not going to make you do it. I'm not going to actually force you to solve this puzzle. You can progress with the story, and I'm just going to leave this hanging over you for several weeks. Or you can make it really obvious and tie it into a trapped room of some kind. The walls are closing in unless you solve the puzzle, and then they think, oh, okay, we're going to have to do this now. But that is an easy puzzle. Do you have something that will stretch us a little more?
Yes, I do. So we'll now move on to our medium puzzle, which is just called Members Only. This is a puzzle that can be used as a way to get past an obstacle, in the sense of like you're trying to get into the Thieves Guild, or there's a secret cult or something like that, and there's a way into this place through a guard, and it sort of sets it up saying like the building or wherever it is, there's only one entrance in, and it's through a barred oak door with sort of slits, and it talks about being deadbolted from the other side, and there's a guard on the inside that's guarding it. And essentially, someone will go up to the door, the guard will open the slit, say a number, and then the person will also say a number, and is either turned away or let in.
I like the description on this one as well, because it really sets the scene. As I say, the good thing about Tasha's is it gives you these purple boxes on the page that you're supposed to say when somebody comes. So a picture puzzle that we've just did had a lovely scene where it sets into the gallery. I've been playing too much Sea of Thieves. I've got it in my mind. But it just says you watch a figure approach an oak door with a slide window. As soon as I see a slide window written down everywhere, you think, oh yeah, here we go, some sort of password. The figure knocks and a guard opens the window and says 6. The figure replies 3. The guard then opens the door, allowing the figure to enter. Oh. And
that is it as well. There's no flavor, there's no like description of the guard or anything like that. It's just pure that. And I can imagine the players going, wait, what?
Yeah. All it says is that the guard has to be any sort of talking creature. So, more monstrous options include bugbear, werebore, or Nikoloff. if that's something you really fancy. Yeah, just throw a Yugal off in there. That's a great thing.
So obviously it seems fairly straightforward that for players who are like, oh, well, this is easy. We just go up and say the same thing. Because again, there's no check for this if they're hiding it for the first one at least. And so they go up and the guard does the same thing, but says a different number. I just love that idea, that sort of initial sort of thing where they go, oh, it's a different number. What do I do? And then you say something and then presumably you get turned away. And then it carries on with this example saying that you see at least up to another 4 people going and doing the same thing. And out of the sort of 4 of those, 2 are turned away from whatever their answer is given. But it also says that if you are trying to listen in to what these people are saying, everyone needs to make a group stealth check. So already you have to do something else at the beginning to get that more information. That's already its own hint in itself, I think. Just quickly going through the other examples. So someone goes, the guard says 12, the person says 6, they're allowed to enter. The guard says 10, the person says 5, and they're turned away. The guard says 7, the person says 5, they enter. And then finally, the guard says 0, the person says 1, and is turned away. So it seems like a very random sort of thing. So you may think that this is a mathematical equation, and it sort of misleads you into thinking that as players. When I read this and didn't read the answer at first, I was like, well, I don't actually know what this could be.
Because the first thing is your mind is, right, I think the number's being halved. That's all it is. It's 12 to 6 and 10 to 5. Oh, no, they've got turned away. Okay, so it's not that. And then 0 being given as a solution, you start to think, oh, hang on, the maths of this is beginning to get a little bit complicated now. This doesn't feel very good. But this is not maths at all, is it?
No. So essentially, it is very similar to the creature painting. So the valid response is giving the number of letters in the number that the guard sets. And it's quite nice because it actually describes that the solution, like I said, yes, it's supposed to mislead players into thinking they've overheard a maths question. So they need to overcome their own assumptions about stuff. And I think that's incredible because a lot of the times in riddles and stuff, there has to be assumptions made in order to work out the puzzle. So there's just something about this I quite like, where it's like, oh, I've made an assumption here that it's going to be maths based and we can easily work this out because the way to do it. And then it's not. It's just a completely disguised way of doing it. I just thought that was just so clever. And it talks about when you're customizing it, the more the puzzle that plays with the numbers as words rather than as the numerical digits, the more challenging it's likely to be because you have to, as players, challenge that initial assumption that, oh, it's a maths question rather than a comprehension question.
And it's such an elegantly simple solution as well. That's the frustrating thing. I can imagine the penny dropping on your players during a session and everyone goes, oh, or a delightful like exclamation of breath, whatever reaction may be. It's a real one where you go, okay, that's fantastic. 5, literally the answer is 4. 4, the answer is 4. 9, the answer is 4. You're starting to go, okay, no, I get this now. I really I'm getting this as a solution now. But as I say, there are hints you can be given as well, if required. A little bit harder this time.
Yes, so the investigation and insight ones you get. The investigation one talks about, well, there doesn't seem to be a mathematical equation at all. And I think that would give them the first clue. It's like, okay, we need to think about this in a different way. And then the insight one, again, is a bit more stronger at this point. It's suspected something to do with the word being said rather than the number. So again, both of those are just trying to disassociate from it being a maths question, which I think is a bit more suitable without necessarily giving the answer completely away compared to the creatures one. But yeah, I just quite like that in the sense of it talks about like you don't have to use numbers as the words. You can use them as anything. You can use like flower as in the actual flower that grows outside. So that is 6. And then any other words like that, if it's all themed in some way, you can also do that.
Yeah, the number that is provided as something you've got to find the solution to can be changed to absolutely anything. But then I quite like there's another variation of this which makes it even harder, where the response required doesn't have to be the number of letters in the word. It can be any other word with that number of letters in it. So you could say, okay, rose, and somebody replies with ball, and that's fine as an answer. And you think, okay, fine. Maybe that would be easier. Maybe it would be harder. It depends on how your brain works, I think. But there's all kinds of variations on this.
Deceptively simple, and you could put it in any way. Like you said, it talks about gaining entry into some place. But actually, and you could use it as sort of like, oh, it's getting into the big bad's hideout or anything like that. But I think like if you were using like a flower example or like more nature words and stuff like that, maybe you could go into a druid circle, maybe with the passcode to it, like a cool bar. I don't know. Like I just thought it's just something different. If you can't get in, you're not allowed in. If you try and attempt to get in, more guards come out. There's like no other way in, and it doesn't rely on magic per se. Like again, with all these things, you think, oh well, maybe they'll just magic their way in some way. But if there's already lots of guards in there, it seems like a silly thing to do. So they have to engage their brains first and think about how to do this encounter without combat or using magic per se.
Anything that doesn't have a sort of combat related thing, although it does sort of give a DM's solution if they do try and attack where there's just loads of guards waiting behind the door. So don't bother. It's not going to work for you. That would describe itself as a medium puzzle. Mm-hmm. Do you have an example of a hard puzzle for us?
I do. Now, this hard puzzle, I think, is very much context specific. I guess it takes a little bit more tweaking, I think, compared to the other two that we've just discussed. So we're going to look at the hard puzzle, which is the haunted hallway. And the idea behind this one is that there are, it talks about spirits that linger in the world because they can't leave something behind. They have unfinished business. So finding this solution means that a ghost finds peace in some way. So it describes that you are in a sort of a hallway, and at one end of the hallway is a ghost girl crying, and it talks about like she's non-combatant, she's not gonna fight you, she's gonna keep appearing and disappearing until you actually speak to her. And her unfinished business is very simple. She can't pick up her doll that's on the ground until she remembers the name, and she can't remember the name. And along this hallway, there are these alcoves which have numbers 1 to 6. And in each alcove, sort of scratched into the back, with sort of being illuminated by the candlelight, is a verse or something which describes a member of her family. And whilst she sort of is very aloof and doesn't necessarily answer questions directly, if you're asking like, why are you here, all that sort of thing, those are more direct questions. But anything beyond that, she's a bit aloof and doesn't know because she's a ghost and she's lost memories. If you ask her specific questions about names of her family, so it's like, what is the name of your mother, she will answer to it. And then when it goes to like, well, what's the name of your doll, she does a little sort of phrase, and what it is that you need to find out the names of 6 people that were important to her, or 6 associations with her that were important to her, and then work out from them what the name of the doll is. And if you give that to her, then she's allowed to be freed. And it's like spooky, how do we finish this? But it's not
delightfully
scary.
Creepy. Mm-hmm. Anything with a small child in it that's crying automatically makes you go weird. And a doll as well. Mm-hmm. Easily make it a porcelain doll, one of those really creepy ones that people collect that look like small babies. That's a whole other session in itself. Yes. Just
creepy dolls.
Creepy dolls, yeah. Exactly. Now, there are several component parts to this one, aren't there? I think it's interesting because any puzzle that involves reacting to an NPC where they talk back to you is an intriguing one for the DM to try and manage, because they have got to think about not giving too much information away. How does the NPC react to the party if they ask slightly tangential questions, or if they're being a bit random or going off the solution a little bit? You've got to be able to keep it nice and restrained, not give too much away. And as I say, it depends on whether or not this puzzle is going to be important for progression or not. If it's just a little side hustle, then you can afford to not really be as liberal with the hints as you would need to be if you need them to complete this puzzle to progress, for instance. But yeah, it's really tricky, isn't it? Because you've got to figure out who these people all relate to, or the verses relate to. And she won't say anything otherwise unless you do. It's tricky.
And I will say, I think bar 1, it's not obvious what the association is. So I can read out the first couple. So not his keeper, nor he mine, loved and hated at the same time. And then in brackets, it's for the DM, it says, this is the brother. And I'm like, is it? I was like, oh.
Loved and hated at the same time has got to be the hint on that one. It's a sibling, isn't it? Like there must be something like that. A
sibling of some sort, yeah.
Exactly. But you don't necessarily have to get these in order. Some, I think, are slightly easier. So verse 2 is my first vision, her hazel eyes, my first sound, her lullabies. I think I'd get that as the mother.
Yes, I think so.
Mm-hmm. And there's other ones that are quite cool as well.
her lives she lost all 3 by 3, and through the dark this hunter sees. And like I was like, oh yeah, it's bloody cat. Like,
Yep.
but that's the thing is I think what's cool, if you were going in order, because obviously these alcoves are numbered 1 to 6, you were like, okay, so it's going to be members of a family, and getting something like that, you go, oh, not all of them are going to be like mother, father, brother, sister. It's more than that. And like as you go down, you've got like grandfather, the teacher, and then finally the horse. You're like, gosh, this kid's got a lot of creatures to look at. The hints actually are quite interesting in this, because he says you can either persuade her to give something, to give you some more hints, or intimidate, compared to before when we had investigation and insight. I guess it's quite interesting using this for a way for players to sort of suss, because it encourages the characters to engage with it rather than the players. Be interesting to see, like, would they use intimidation against a ghost that is clearly harmless?
Yeah, small harmless ghost child. How do your players feel about the situation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, the barbarian may have thoughts on this, so
just tell us the answer. Yeah, puzzle.
Exactly. Although again, if you've got, if you ask for the hint and you do have that proficiency, then don't forget you get these hints automatically. So it's intriguing to think how you're going to do that. Your character is intimidating and is getting visibly frustrated without even meaning to, which causes the girl to divulge that information without really being pressed if the players are asking for hints. I think you'll get a good sense of it pretty quickly as a DM. If your players are really struggling, they will be looking to you, they will be getting confused, they will have their heads in their hands, thinking about it a lot. It'll be quite obvious as to whether or not they are stuck against a wall and enjoying it, or if they're still playing around with answers and they don't necessarily need a hint because they're still bouncing off each other. I think you'll get a good sense of it.
I think the other thing to note as well, like right in the beginning when it talks about it, when you ask the question, she provides the correct response, but she also spells out the name. And I think that obviously that's important for later on. But again, it's interesting compared to so the charisma persuasion check, where she sort of tells you, if you're not asking her directly, you go, oh, it's the mother, you're saying to the other characters, and you've persuaded her, she will just say what the name is without you going to prompt her. Whereas compared to the intimidation, she talks about, oh, well, I need to remember these things, and it's very important why it's spelled correctly, but I don't know why. So I think you get a little bit more information, like more direct information when she's intimidated, which I think it's quite sad in a way, because you're like, you don't want to, yes, as a good person, it's like, I want them to be able to tell that willingly.
But I guess that is your prerogative as a DM to change those around slightly. If you wanted to not reward intimidation, you could easily make that into a harder persuasion check, for instance. It talks about you can have the same skill on 2 different hints. It just gives you the easier hint first, and then you have to ask again for the second check. So it's possible. And I think you could definitely mix this up a little bit. You'd have to, again, think of a name that you would want the solution to be, and then put some different names into the alcoves to represent differences. It would require picking apart a little bit and putting back together to get a different solution, but you could definitely do it. And I think you could change around the setting a little bit as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be a small child. It could be a page looking for the name of the guest they're delivering food to, for instance, and they don't know where they're going. You could have anything from maybe sort of a shop attendant looking for an item in a grocery store, and they can't leave until they've picked up the right item, or something silly like that. I think there's different ways you could play with it.
Yeah, I like that, because it doesn't necessarily, what Tasha says, doesn't necessarily give you that option compared to the other two. And I like that. I guess it maybe just like, it's a bit harder, so you might need to think more to pick it apart. But yeah, it's very straightforward. And like you said sort of earlier on, is that you could also, with the spirit being put to rest, so once she does find out what the name of her doll is, if she says it, can pick up the doll, she can then leave. But she can also give hints and more information that might, she will be like, oh, I remember that big bad person came through here before, they went that way, or something like that. Or giving more information, or a dangerous secret or something like that as she disappears. Yeah, if you help her out, you can definitely make it so there's some sort of benefit to the players. That's not necessarily like, oh, here's a lot of treasure or loot I've just dropped, including this creepy doll. And you're like, no thanks, that sounds awful.
Exactly. Yeah, that's always a fun thing. The treasure doesn't necessarily have to be physical gold. It can be a secret. Be careful of the man with the blue lapels, or something like that. And suddenly you're like, oh, hang on, that person's been with our campaign for the last 10 sessions. What's going on?
Wait, what, Dolores? And she's gone.
She goes into the spirit realm. There are some amazing puzzles in this book, and those are 3 examples. I like the fact that your brain immediately goes for the 3 that involve counting letters. It's something that you must enjoy without really realizing. But also, it's kind of fun in the sense that it's a similar idea for all 3 of these puzzles, but different interpretations of it to get to different difficulty levels. So there are all kinds of different ways you can press this to make it, harder or easier for your party, depending on whether they've particularly annoyed you or not, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, like all these puzzles are really, really interesting. And all of them, I think, can be done online as well as in person. But there's one early on, which is like a step puzzle, so you have to step in a certain order or something like that to create words and stuff. And I was like, God, how would I do that online? And the answer is, I wouldn't. I'm going to do counting puzzles instead.
So, yeah, how would you put these into your campaign? Are you looking to do this sort of thing? Like, would you avoid puzzles?
Oh, good question, actually. I think certainly the members only one, where it's more thinking outside the box. It's like, why are they giving numbers and stuff? I think I'd use that maybe a little bit more, or tweak that in a sense, because I think it's that sort of thing where they have to, in order to get into a place, and that it could be before they have to do a lot of trials, like a dungeon, or how to get in, and not necessarily do they know how to get out. I think that one I would definitely use going forward. I think the other 2, they're a bit more specific in the sense of like the creature painting ones that, you have to be somewhere where there's paintings or pictures in some respect. And you maybe have to think about it, because it might be, I don't know, not as forced. Like, there is an art museum. Like, why would you go there? I say, good point. And the haunted hallway, I really like this idea. Like, again, like you are helping a ghost and sort of thing. But I think for my purposes, something that delivers satisfaction in a way that's like, of course, it's this. I think I would go for the members only one out of the 3 of them myself. What about you?
Yeah, I think they all have potential. I like the idea of the pictures being put into a book or some sort of novel, so they don't necessarily have to be pictures on a wall. It could just be there's a spell book on the table and somebody has been doodling in it, and you have to look for the doodles that are out of place or graffiti that has been put behind maybe pews in a church or something. Like, you could have all kinds of different variations on that. It's simple enough that I think it could be really good fun. So I like the idea of the creature paintings on. I must say, I have to play around with that and spring it on people at some point. Well, while we puzzle out how we're going to put these into the campaign, where can we find you in the meantime, Thea, if we need another dose of Fiona creativity?
Well, when I'm not scratching my head about going, puzzles, yes, you can find me on the What Am I Rolling podcast, a twice monthly RPG one-shot podcast. As always, it's going well. I am probably doing a lot of projects. It's so funny listening to these back and going, oh yeah, that happened like 2 months ago, but never mind. Yeah. But yeah, it's all going very well. Improv stuff's going well. At some point, hopefully when the time this comes out, my Patreon and Discord will be up.
That's true. Yes.
I need to just get. Oh, this is a reminder for future Fiona, when she listens back to this. Like, you should really get on that. But all the work is there. So
I like the irony of it, because you made me get onto mine for my YouTubing stuff so vigorously, and then I guess I should probably put the pressure back in the other direction. That's probably the polite thing to do.
Tell you what, remind me when we next record. How's that? We'll do it then.
Definitely. If you want to come say hello to me, I do have a Discord because I sorted it out. So come to the UrsaRyan Discord and we can chat about all things D&D and whatever's going on in the world. So you should pop along and say hello.
Puzzles, yes.
Until then, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye.